Good morning, everyone. Today I will be sight reading a chapter from my dear friend Darian's book. I will be reading the chapter labeled Stolen Goods. Everyone has that crazy story that we think of. No one will ever believe a word I am saying. And so we keep it to ourselves. My favorite words, no one will ever believe you. Being a flight attendant can be the most rewarding job, and you will leave so many stories, or leave with so many stories. It's surprising that there aren't more books about flight attendant experiences because that shit would sell like the hottest new trend. So, a funny story, while I was out on one of my trips of the month, the company forgot me in Barcelona for 5 whole days. Now, don't get me wrong, I fucking love Barcelona. The city just does something for me. The food, the nightlife, the scenery, the open-mindedness, the people, toma mi dinero. Each time I was rostered a trip that included Barcelona, it obviously became the main focus. I would gladly suffer through a few of the destinations as long as everything went according to plan and my ass still wound up in BCN and at that decked out Barcelona hotel, or Barcelo hotel. I was on a mini vacation while getting paid, a win-win, or so I thought. That trip, in fact, would mark one of the last few times I actually went to Barcelona with the company and for myself. At the time, I was in online school, and being studious me, I wanted to make sure that I got all of my schoolwork for the week done before I indulged myself with extracurricular activities. And by extracurriculars, I mean clubbing, eating out, sightseeing, etc., being the ultimate tourist. On the second day, and after having finished my long list of assignments, I wanted to visit the Sagrada Familia again and do some proper tourist work. Later that night, I went out alone. It was truly one of the best nights I'd spent there. I'd hopped around discovering new areas. I had gone to 3 different bars and 2 different nightclubs, and by the time 3 a.m. rolled around, I was fucked up. The music was roaring through the walls and my head was whirling faster than a fidget spinner. I don't know how the neighboring apartment dwellers slept, but tonight, I could care less. I danced all night with the girls and the boys. Halfway through my time at the final club, as expected, I'd come out of my shirt and was sandwiched between a curly-haired girl with freckles and her unrealistically handsome friend. We danced and we drank and we danced some more. The party kept going. Barely able to translate the time on my phone through my blurred vision, I could only assume that the sun was on the verge of rising. It was time for bed, and as much as I wanted to stay with the Spanish Merida and Rico Suave, I knew it was best that I take my leave. Besides, as it would turn out, I would be there another 3 days, so I got their numbers, got some nice wet kisses on the cheek, retrieved my coat, and was on my drunken way. Miraculously, I made my way back to the hotel. I slugged past the front desk agent who I'd seen many a time. Hector was his name. And my goodness, was he cute. There was something in the Spanish water. He had ridiculously sharp features and piercing gray eyes. I wondered why he was here instead of on the cover of someone's magazine. Not that I was complaining. He was nice to look at, but in my current state, I felt a slight tingle of embarrassment stumbling in this late. Early? Late? Early? Whatever. Hola, his rich voice rolling into my ears. Hola, buenos dias, Hector. ¿Todo bien? I responded, trying to hold it together. He chuckled. Seemingly surprised by my extensive continuation of his polite greeting, trust me, so was I. Sí, estoy bien. Un poco cansado, pero todo bien, gracias, he spoke. Ah, sí, entiendo. Yo también. Okay, I need to fucking run before this goes any further and I humiliate myself with the lack of Spanish I know beyond this point. Dulces sueños. His voice trailing behind me as I began to pick up the pace toward the elevator. You too, guapo. You too. Gracias, Hector. My face was hot. Was it the alcohol? Maybe it was the unnecessarily warm entryway. Was this because he'd just spoken to me in Spanish and I wanted to know what he sounded like when he came? Or was it simply because I was drunk? Shit, it was all of it. Watching the elevator's heavy steel doors close, the icy mirrors stuck to my skin as I fell into it. Eyes closed, I listened to the slow dings as I continued to rise to my floor. I held onto the rails to steady myself because I was so tired and the drinks weren't helping. The numbers strolled by while the vibrating neon lights danced off of the mirror and freshly polished bordering walls, their colors mimicking the iridescent vibes of the nightclub. Oh, how I loved to be here. In this city, I felt free. When I finally made it down the long hallway and looked inside of a spaceship and into my room, the cold air greeting me in a frosty embrace, I couldn't bring myself to strip and shower before bed. Instead, my body heavy, spinning circles around me, fell into the soft sheets. I'll just shower in the morning. Today was a good day. Sinking slowly into the plush fabrics as my eyes began to close, the white walls began to swallow me whole as I replayed a seamlessly perfect day. Perfect sights, perfect food, perfect music, and perfect people. These are the moments I live for. The spontaneous brush with fate I long to be a part of. These were the moments that would dilute all the bad shit. Buenas noches, Barcelona. And good morning. I reached over and flipped the switch to bring some of that beautiful Spaniard light into the room, the slow whirl of the drapes, machinery sinking into the blare of the city buses, cars, and bumbling voices. Its chaotic noise flowing through the thick glass-like music, my stomach, however, deciding it didn't accept being left out, starting to crash and like treacherous waves before a full-on tsunami. I shot up from the bed and made my way to the single space where the toilet was waiting for a morning greet with my ass. It can be quite a bore when you are on a work trip with no known crew members, a little lonely. Upside of being alone is that you don't have to deal with any egos, bickering on who wants to go where and who wants to do what, which is why I encourage you to travel on your own as often as you possibly can. Breakfast was, as usual, eloquently put together and tasted great. Not that I could have much besides the fruit and veggies anyhow. Their menu wasn't much structured for the vegan lifestyles, and because of that, I'm forced to go out afterwards and purchase my own goods to make sure that I have nutrients to get me through the day. When I'd finished the last drop of the peach smoothie they'd prepared for the day, I noticed a familiar face across the cafeteria. His little hair swoop, probably now out of habitual styling, fell in just the right place, at just the right angle, across his smooth forehead. I couldn't recall his name, but I could vividly remember the last time I'd seen him. We'd called him Henry. Henry was French and had been stationed at the Gatwick base before he'd moved over to the French base. He was tall and slim, but fit, with broad shoulders that cast a shadow over anyone beneath him. I'd always thought there was a height limit to be a flight attendant, but here we were. The soft sheen on his skin glistened each time it was caught by the sun. Every inch of him was soft to the touch, and in areas that mattered most. He'd left just a hint of stubble for texture. I don't remember where exactly we'd met. Los Angeles? New York? Stockholm? Beats me. You all, this man was fucking loaded. In the front, in the back, from the side, up the hill and down the river. It's always deceiving to feel a guy's dick outside the pants. Fabric and space do not tell the truth all the time. Needless to say, there had been some rather disappointing moments, so because of that, I don't usually pay any mind to it when I'm at the groping stage. Not that I don't like it. If I can feel there's quite a bit there, then we're good. Unless I'm topping, then I really don't care. But it's still nice to hold the joystick while test driving the car. We'd gotten into some sideline conversations while everyone else was chittering about annoying passengers and what their favorite layovers were. And once we had to outfill of alcohol and feel off of each other, we, without a word, made our way to the room, and the race was off. Before we could even get the door closed behind us, he'd grabbed me and started kissing me. In the midst of our rough makeout, we started to remove each other's clothing. His nipples were a nice tint of a berry rouge and had perfect fade out around the areola. The way his chest pressed together in the center made me want to push my face deep in them. Okay, perhaps now I understand why people like to motorboat boobs. He laid down on the bed and kissed me as his hand coursed along my side until it reached my thigh. My eyes rolling in the back of my head, my body was pulled from me, my spirit not far behind me, as he lifted the tail end of my back up to rub himself against me. I could feel my drenched underwear rubbing up against his head. He undid my belt and ripped my pants off of me. It's okay. I didn't want them anyhow. I came up to assist in removing his, but he swatted my hands away. Okay, that's also fine. The next few seconds felt like someone had pressed a slow motion button. I watched, mouth wide open as his pants moved down and over his firm ass. The slow motion reel allowed my supersonic hearing to hear its bounced and clap as it settled. As he brought his hands to the front of the pants, I caught a quick glimpse of the base. Thick. Thick. I looked at him. He looked at me. I looked at it. He looked down and kept on. The khaki slacks continued to slide past his thigh, and I wondered where exactly the uncut off point of it was. I also wondered if I were even prepared to take all of it, let alone ever. My heart in my feet, I watched in shock as his brief slid over his semi-flaccid dick. In fairness, my intentions were not to be here in this room with him. I had even really thought to meet up with anyone on this trip. But here I was, about to have my insides rearranged by a man with a mini baseball bat between his legs. As the pre-cum streaming from his dick disconnected from the fluorescent green briefs, I could feel my insides contracting in horror. How does someone take something like that? It had to be 11 inches. 12? It must have been wearing the fear and confusion on my face because I heard him giggle while pinching out wads of pre-cum and putting it into his mouth. Okay, that was fucking hot. Are you okay? He asked me. His French accent strong. Yeah, I'm good. Your dick is huge. I was not expecting that. Then again, I've heard that a lot of French guys are pretty hung. I guess that's the truth, huh? Okay, Chattermouth. Ah, yes, just a bit. But I wanted to ask you something, actually. His face showing great concern for whatever it was circling his mind. What's up? I asked, sitting up, close enough to hear the heartbeat of his dick. My interest was more than piqued. I have never bottomed, and I would like to... Yes, I answered, half relieved and excited to be his first. Wait, what? His brows pulled tightly together. Yes, I'll fuck you. I mean, look at you. And I wouldn't mind being your first time, though I do have to ask, are you sure you want to do it with me? We've only met like twice, the first time just in passing. I'm hardly qualified to be who you want to do it with, but I'm not saying no, for the record. He chuckled and his dick laughed too, wiggling there between his legs. No, I know, he said, sitting down next to me. It's been on my mind the entire trip, and we have been hanging out, and I like your attitude, so no, I don't mind at all. Say less. Are you prepared for it? That is my number one pet peeve. Oh yes, I did it before we all left for dinner, and I checked again when we returned. I am good to go, but I do want to eat your ass and maybe fuck you too, if that's okay. His proud smile spreading across his face. Music to my ears. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it, yeah? Our bodies connected with such force, we crashed onto the bed, rolling around wildly. My hands mapped his body as I licked my way from his neck to his collarbone and down his pecs and finally his nipples. I took those blush kisses in my mouth and had my way with him. I was leaking, watching him writhe around, moaning and grunting, moving on to the other. I licked my index finger and thumb before pressing his nipple between them like a hot-pressed panini. Once I was done torturing his nerves, I took a stroll past the little mountains, the V-shaped river run, and down the massive log floating above two massive boulders. I worked on that thing for a good 5 minutes. There was no way I didn't look a fucking wreck. Tears running down my face, spit still connected between his schlong and my chin. I wasn't done yet. It's sort of my thing to just please and take care of my bottom. I'm a pleaser. And it was time to have a go at the backside, and Lord, was it beautiful as the front. You know, those community pools where they plaster signs that say, no diving, but the badass would do it anyway? Yeah, this is that pool, and I'm the badass kid. Face first, I slithered my way in, the friction from the tightness of the inner part of his ass cheek against my face. Ecstasy. Hints of musk, and now the faded remnants of a wood shower gel filled my nostrils. The salty flavor awakening my taste buds in delight. I wound my way down and traced the outer parts of his hole. He arched his back, letting out a throaty moan. Let the games begin. I took hold of both cheeks, my hands barely able to contain them. I pulled him closer into me, pushing his midsection down into the bed, his ass now risen to the sky, open and practically begging for me to have my way with it. It would be my honor. I funneled my tongue down and felt the warmth wrap around it. He gently clenched, and for a moment, I was trapped within. I spanked and spat and tugged and sucked on his hole. By now, the color of it had changed from that berry rouge of his nipples to a more punchy rosewood, the heat and excitement rushing the blood into it. Dropping a wad of spit from my mouth, I slid it inside as I move around in a circular motion, before pressing my middle finger in and against the wall closest to his prostate. One finger in and the other hand free. I took a hold of his dick that created a puddle of pre-cum underneath. I could tell if he were still semi-hard or completely erect. A wad of his clear fluids connected with my chin on its way to my mouth. It tasted sweet, and the texture was like a refreshing aloe drink without the chunky bits. Someone has been eating their fruit. He moaned and burrowed himself between the pillows. The intensity of his arch in his back was something that would make anyone weak at sight. I ran my hands along the sides of his firm dorsi muscles, grabbing a hold of the large protruding muscles like a mountain lion on its prey and pushing my tongue into his hole. Once I finally came up for air, I looked down at the beautiful mess I'd made in front of me. My dick was literally throbbing at this point. I positioned his ass where his rouge flower and the head of my dick met. My own pre-cum flowed out and onto the pathway between his cheeks before it settled on the now swollen area I'd not too long ago ravished to life. I squeezed out more, bent over, and pushed some of it in to him and took the rest on the tip of my finger for myself. The room had become exceptionally humid and sticky. Pellets of sweat had begun to form on his back. They stood still, unprovoked, but waiting for what might come next. The sudden quietness within the walls of the hotel and out created a solitude-like experience. We were here, in his room. Our bodies were bare and on showcase for each other, skin touching and sticking together like weak adhesive. The smell of our bodies after an active day swam through the air. His hair was astray and point in several directions, but somehow it still looked as good as it had when we were downstairs with the others. The way his nose was bent from being pressed against the pillow made him look like a different person. His body was calm and readily available for me to continue on with whatever I wanted to do. I watched the slight twitch from his right cheek and marveled at the sight of his dick laying there, pulled back between his mighty thighs. He turned over on his back. How did he know this was my favorite position? Our eyes running back and forth over the other's face, I guided my dick to the surface of his hole, the tiny hairs of a week-old shave grazing across the nerves of my head, sending a jolt of electricity up my spine. I leaned in for a kiss as I pressed my way into him. He welcomed me warmly, opening up and guiding me along a slippery passage. Our moans rang up, peering into his eyes. I knew this was what he'd wanted. This was why he had cozied up to me throughout the day. The reason he'd insisted that I join he and the crew out for dinner, though I'd brought my own food for the duration of the trip, and made certain that we sat next to each other wherever he went. He wasn't the type that you could automatically read as being gay, but the hairs on the back of my neck were still raised by the lingering touches and handshakes and gazes. Oblivious me, I trumped it down to him being an overly sweet guy. He was European. No, he wanted me. His legs wrapped around me like a bow on a freshly wrapped gift, my arm planted firmly next to his face, while my right hand grasped his thick neck, my thumb and pointer finger pressing on either side of his jugular veins. Mouth ajar, his eyes broke their focus and began to roll back slowly. I opened my legs wider, allowing for the shape of his ass to fit perfectly between my thighs like a puzzle piece. The curvature of my dick nudged against his prostate, and I could see his balls contract and relax. Are you good? Is this okay? I whispered into his ear, kissing on his earlobe. Yes, I'm perfect, he responded, pulling our bodies together in a tight embrace. Fuck me, he uttered, with pleasure. We swapped positions with ease, missionary, reverse and normal cowboy, on the edge of the bed, in front of the mirror where the heat from our breath created short-lived moisture spots. The way he absorbed every detail through his emerald green eyes made me feel like I was watching everything, but from his point of view. He stared back at me, his moans shifting aggressively between highs and low tones. If we kept at it like this, I was certain I'd come soon. We can't have that, I thought to myself. I pulled out slowly. Cue synchronized moans. I turned him around and placed him against the cold marble sink counter. There was no telling which was wetter, my morning face towel or his dick, pre-cum hanging down like a spider web. Slurp. I placed both of my hands around his dick and got to work, giving the full performance. My head whirled around wildly as saliva tricked down my beard and onto the floor below. He grabbed the back of my head and pushed himself further into my mouth and down my throat. I received him with great finesse. Surprised, he looked down at me, and I looked at him and winked. Surprise, surprise. We made our way back to the bed where I positioned him at the edge, all his glory exposed to me. Well, me. After I'd gone back for a second serving, I stood and slid back into his warmth. The heaviness of his voice could have probably did, disturb the guest of the bordering rooms. I'm close, I said, with clenched teeth. He released me from his grasp, turned over onto his back, and aided me back inside. Miraculous. Me too, he spoke, his accent stronger than it had been all night. I grabbed onto the inner parts of his thigh, closest to his pelvic region, and went to town. Our musk, the sound of slapping flesh and heavy breathing, and the quick exchanges of kisses pushed me closer and closer to the periphery of climax. Faster and harder, slower and gentler, faster and harder again. I'm gonna come. My breath was weighted. Oh fuck, me too. Come for me. His dick was beautiful. If it weren't for the fact that his muscles were squeezing the head of my dick in a self-taught chokehold, I could have come simply by watching him jerk off. Here we go. I pulled out and cum flew everywhere, and I mean everywhere, directly past his face and onto the pillow, onto his firm and round chest. A long stream spread across his abs and down to his belly button, and the remaining bit hung from my dick. Concomitantly, he erupted with me, mine thick and his more so liquid. It shot out like a sputtering sprinkler, and it was a lot. This was definitely going to be quite the cleanup. Still covered in both our essence, he spun around and took my dick in his mouth. He tugged on my dick, and it was like an empty tube of toothpaste. I winced, sensitive. We kissed once more, and I could taste the both of us on our lips, a sweet and salty flavor. I'll get you a towel, I said as I walked away. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I should have probably gone to say hello, but for the moment, for the account of there being no alcohol in my system, I didn't dare go over and make a complete fool of myself. Besides, I had a boyfriend at the time of seeing him at breakfast. Not only that, but he was also not out, and he seemed lost in the book he was reading. So that little memory will be stored away until I am one with the earth. Heading back to my room, I ran into another incoming crew. I wondered if the company had forgotten about me. It had been 4 days at this point, and as much as I was enjoying myself, I had begun to get restless. And on top of that, I had been spending far more than I should have. After an easy convincing from a couple of my colleagues, we strutted out into the night. One more twirl of the town wouldn't kill me. There's something about a Friday night that seems to wake up the ghouls who would have been hibernating during their normal work week. The rekindling interactions being made in packed restaurants throughout the busy streets and quaint patios could bring a smile to anyone's face. We jumped from bar to bar before making our way to one of the city's popular gay nightclubs. The air was thick with the scent of perspiration, hormones, and perseverance. The great game of who's taking who home was at its fullest. Figures of all shapes danced around wildly. Flashing lights bounced off the beads of sweat coating the shoulders and faces of Barcelona's finest. Their skin resembled that of 1,000 spit-shined disco balls. We danced for what felt like days, taking turns on buying rounds of drinks and talking endlessly with locals and visitors alike. At some point, one of the locals dragged me to a dark room located at the side of the club. Not that he could do me much showing, but there was no visible light within the room, hence its perfect name. My other senses, however, were heightened and wasted no time filling in what my eyes could not see. The smell backhand slapped me as we entered the mysterious space. The sound of sticky flesh connecting mumbled over muffled moaning, clapping, and deep grunts. The smell was so intense I could taste it. And let's not forget about the wandering hands. The endless, unsolicited touching and attempted fondles. My heart felt like it was going to tear through my chest if I didn't make an escape. As the night came to an end, my shirt jammed through my belt loop and my body drenched with sweat. I dared not imagine how my underwear smelled. My feet felt, well, I couldn't feel my feet. The lights began to move slower than they had all night, so slow that if I were to reach out, I could grab a hold of each one. My body was oddly tight and loose at the same time, as though some giant fist had a strong grip on me, squeezing and releasing, toying with me. Why is everyone looking at me? Maybe the liquor was doing something different this night, and it was time for me to make my way back to the hotel. I stumbled to coat check and found this beautiful being all done up, pixie-cut red hair with strategically placed tattoos for the evening sitting on their phone. Why can't I say anything? I looked around aggressively. They looked up at me and we finally made eye contact. I probably looked like a deranged killer trying to be normal. I wondered if I had looked as bad as I thought I did. ¿Tienes tu boleto? Their voice gently and soothing against the heavy music. Digging around my pockets like Mary Poppins' purse, I finally found my ticket and handed it over, still feeling like I was being watched. I spun around, taking in the grand entrance of the nightclub. Nope, everyone seemed to be minding their business and enjoying their time. A couple of guys who were making out in the corner, grabbing each other's dicks. One girl was bent over in the back of her head while her friend sat beside her, rubbing her back. I turned back around just in time to see the coat checker holding out my items. One crosshatched jacket and a large beige scarf I'd found a couple of months ago out in Oslo. As I made my way up the stairs, I tripped on air and a firm hand caught me from the side. I looked around and saw the shape of a man standing next to me, his body firm and kept. He smelled of strong cedar wood and sweat. Barely recognizable, I smiled and extended the most convincing gracias that I could. My head hurts. I definitely had too much to drink, and I was suffering the consequences. How many drinks had I had? Was I going to experience my first hangover tomorrow? Most importantly, I needed to actually make it to the hotel and worry about all of that later. The man let go of my arm while I regained my balance, and I continued on my merry way up the eternal stairs. The darkness of the night spread as far as I could make out, and the streets were as quiet as workers, children, and their parents had settled down hours ago. All the while, I was meters away, throwing back drinks. I only had about 4 drinks. With the way they poured, there was no way I had gotten this drunk in Barcelona off of 4 drinks. I thought to myself as I struggled to shove my way through the armholes of my coat as my lifeless scarf dangled from my mouth. Straight ahead, the hotel awaited my return. The sheets freshly made and cool from the room's low temperature. I knew as soon as I passed through the threshold that I would leave a trail of clothes for me to tidy up come morning. The further I got from the uns of the nightclub, the more it was replaced by the sound of the city. The wind whistled through the exposed branches, naked from their preparation of the changing season. Squirrels chittered as they began to welcome to the dimly lit day. Pausing to gather myself, I leaned against one of the metal recycling deposit bins. An intense ringing had sounded and my vision was diminishing as I staggered down the sidewalk. Behind me, I could hear footsteps approaching and I didn't want to look like a drunken fool. Once I seemingly caught my bearings, I pushed off of the metal bin and stood upright. The footsteps had disappeared, and I began to carry on with my trek to the building that I knew was somewhere ahead. I looked around where the quick pattering of steps had gone, but I saw no one. Just a cluster of colors some yards away and a stray cat perched next to a chained bicycle. Heavy foot, I said to the stray before turning back around, and as I did, there was a sharp pain that spread across my face, and everything went black. Fuck. My face hurts. My head is on fire, and I feel like I'm gonna vomit. The flickering light tucked off in front of me, only there for looks, for it illuminated nothing in this alley. Had I fallen over after standing up from the bin? Why am I so cold? What is happening right now? Where am I? I thought. And all at once, each of my senses had rebooted and came crashing in, ready to present me with the devastating reality of the present. I blinked, trying to regain some sort of focus. The cool breeze crept past me, nipping at my thighs and ass, and I felt my body jerking violently into the ground. My body was limp. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I looked around, and it was you. The kind shape who'd helped me catch myself. Going up the stairs, I recognized the mustard color of your coat and the smell of that cologne. You saw me look at you and turned away. My face hurts so much. Why can't I fight you off? From the shape and the weight of you, you couldn't have been that much bigger than I was. Had you been following me? How long were you watching me? When had you done it? I could do nothing but lay there and take it. I was in the bathroom again, helpless, unable to scream out for anyone to help me, scared of what might happen if I tried. What was it about me? Had I welcomed this behavior? Was it the way I danced? Should I not have removed my shirt? I should have stayed in. I should have enjoyed the day and stayed at the hotel. Why me? What the fuck had I done to deserve this shit again? Please just finish and let me be on my way. You're sooner than done. The sooner you're done, the sooner I can try and forget about it. The sooner I can make myself forget about it. When you had finally finished, I stayed there for nearly 15 minutes. 900 seconds as I counted as tears rolled over and onto the stale concrete beneath me. The sun had barely begun to peak before I'd managed to sit myself up against the cold stone wall. Everything on my body was aching. My head felt like it was peeling itself away. The right side of my torso had gone sore from being jammed into the corner. My ass was screaming. Had he even bothered to use lubrication? I pulled at my underwear and trousers until they were once again at my wrist and hoisted myself up, 1 foot at a time. The glare of the rising sun bounced off of the towering buildings around me. As I made my way out from the alleyway, I looked around for any signs of life. The stray cat had vanished. The clumps of colors that had been there before were also gone. Now, there was an elderly woman across the street. We made eye contact, and I wondered then what my face must have looked like after he had punched me. Bruised and probably bloody, I quickly brought the scarf over my head and lowered my face to the ground. Ahead, I could clearly see the shape and shining black paint of my hotel building. Wanting to avoid too many eyes and the likelihood of running into my colleagues, I used the door located to the side of the main entryway. I was focused on getting to the elevator and my room. As I walked through the lobby, silence fell over me. I could see the bright lights again, moving slowly, that I could reach out and bend them to my will. My face still planted to the ground. I moved towards the elevator solely off of memory. What if someone tries to stop me? Did anyone notice? Was I stumbling around? I made it. I stepped to the side as the riders exited and slid my way into the control panel. I pressed 5 and the door close button, hoping that no one would stop them. Just as the thick steel doors were coming to a meet, I could see a woman walking quickly towards them, and for a quick second, the smallest moments where the doors had slowed before they connected, we locked eyes, and the tears that I'd been holding in until I reached my room began to fall. I wept as I walked down the never-ending hallway. With each heave, my head hurt more and more, but I didn't care. This was needed. There was no holding it back anymore. I rushed in, and as I predicted, I tore off my clothes and left a trail to the wash area of the room. Turning on the cold shower, I didn't care to wait until the heat warmed the water. I got in and fell to the cold marble floor. Sat with my arms locked away and my legs beneath the blistering water that connected with my skin felt like pellets from a Swiss minigun. I watched as blood seeped out from under me, its dense color fading into a watered-down version of itself before slipping down into the drain. I cried and cried and cried some more. My skin began to prune, and I wondered to myself, just how long would I have to stay under that temperature to lose consciousness and die? Would my skin begin to boil and blister? How much longer would it take for my skin to melt away? Would I even be recognizable? Would there be nothing left but the skeletal shape of the person who I used to be? I stood up and watched every inch of me harder than I ever had, so much that it began to burn. But I wouldn't do anything to get the feel of him off of me. To be rid of the musky cedar wood doused in disgust and anguish. After I'd halfway decided that I would continue living, I tended to my torn backside as best as I could until the bleeding finally stopped. I ran a cold bath and sat there watching my skin continuing to wrinkle, folding over itself as I ran my thumb against the tips of my 4 fingers. I stayed in the room for the next 2 days. Everything I ordered in. It was uncomfortable to sit, and I was worried that I would have a problem doing so on the operating flight back. Standing and squatting and bending, pretending as though everything was all right. Reporting my assault to the police never crossed my mind. I was in a country where I didn't speak the language. Me, a black gay man, had actively chosen to go out to a nightclub and consumed alcohol. Why didn't you monitor your drinks? Didn't you say that you were drunk? How are you so sure that you weren't giving him signs that you wanted to have sex with him? I could hear them say over controlled laughter. Pointless. So I continued to do what I had done best my entire life, pretend as though everything was okay, push myself to forget everything that had happened, I'd done it before. How hard could it be to do again? Before we left the next morning on the crew transport, I purchased hemorrhoid cream and pain pills. In the airport, I bought 2 neck pillows, one for my neck and the other for my ass. Behind the satin sleep mask I brought with me on the trip, I cried silently until I fell asleep. Like I said, we all have that one crazy story where we think no one will ever believe a word I'm saying, and so we keep it to ourselves. Those of us who have been and those who know understand that the role of a flight attendant can be the most rewarding job, and you will leave with more stories than you can even begin to comprehend. It's very fucking surprising there aren't more books or shows or movies about a flight attendant's experiences. I imagine all of the stories that had to go unfold from fear and retaliation or not being believed. So I tell myself, say nothing, Marcus. Tell no one, Marcus. Die with this, Marcus.